Hello, I'm Dianna Sinovic, and welcome to our interview with Elizabeth Helen Rose, brought to you by the Greater Lehigh Valley Writers Group. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, nice to meet you, Dianna.
Before we start the interview, would you like to share one of your poems with the audience?
Sure, I have it here. I'm just going to hold up. I'll be reading from my book called Conversations of the Soul. And I thought I'm just going to read the first poem because it is a journey from pain to peace. And this is how it all began. And I just want to preface the reading by letting folks know that I had an unknown diagnosis for 2 years. And I was suffering in terrible, unspeakable, hellish pain. And if you jab your funny bone at the highest level, I was like that 24/7 with both arms. And I honestly thought I was going to go out of my mind. And the only thing I could do was walk, cry, sing, and pray. And I used to sleep in my jogging clothes because I had to wait for my husband to come home from work at 5 o'clock to shower and dress me. And so it is from the depth of this pain that this poem was born, or that the book was even born. So pain. Even in the night, when the arms of sleep have finally rocked me still, you rouse me. Why? In the dark, I wince at your loathsome presence. Your fingers jab me. Monster, my daily companion. Are we a pair, a duo, linked forever by one misfortune? And here we lie, shackled together. You exasperate me. You drive me mad because where I go, you go also. Oh, you clink your chain and I must follow. But you have limits and I have boundaries. However hard you try, however far you stretch your tentacles, you may grope for, but never reach that private room, that sacred place where I can go, where one stands guard, the master of my soul.
Great, thank you. Well, it sounds like you've traveled an interesting path in your life. You've mentioned some of the challenges. You want to talk a little bit more about what happened?
I was 47 years old. And as I said, I was in ungodly pain, but it was also the idleness that was hellish. It started with a muscle burn in my right bicep and spread and grew worse. And I went from doctor to doctor and medical test after medical test. 2 years passed, 7 doctors, I still had no diagnosis. And some doctors wanted to cut my wrists open and say, well, maybe you have carpal tunnel. Well, maybe it's your ulnar nerve. I had a lot of maybes, but nothing definite. And so finally, after almost 2 years, my husband took me to the Hunter Hand and Nerve Clinic in Philadelphia. And Dr. Hunter, I remember he was about 74 at the time, and he took both fingers and he poked me here in my neck, and I just collapsed. The pain was horrific. And he said, you never had a problem in your arms. He said, your problem is in your neck. And I had several EMGs up to that point, but they never went higher than my elbow, the tests. And so he confirmed my diagnosis, brachial plexopathy or thoracic outlet syndrome. And 2 years had passed, and he said, it's really too late for you. because if you had come to me earlier, I could have put you in physical therapy, but your muscles have been leaking a fluid and all of that has turned to cement. And if you hang your arm like dead wood, and I had a little bit of use in my left arm, I could hook it like this and reach for something. But that's how I lived. And thoracic outlet syndrome affects the nerves and blood vessels in your neck. And you get it a couple of ways. You can get it through trauma, like a football player. You can get it from birth if a doctor pulls you out of the birth canal with your arm and he overstretches those neck muscles. It's called Erb's palsy. And so I know several children that have Erb's palsy. And so we've had those discussions. And you can also get it from repetitive strain, like typing, which happened to me because I had been typing on the computer 600 hours of overtime. So mine developed from that. And my dominant right arm hung, and I was having these constant zaps of electricity. And so we lived in medical waiting rooms, and my heartbreak came. I was a pianist, and my heartbreak came when that came to a screeching halt. I was a choir director at church. Music was my whole life. And one by one, these beloved activities, halted everything. And I had horrible blinding headaches. Sometimes they would lead to nausea. And one of the changes that happened was I'm a little bit of a clean fanatic, less now than I was then, but piles of laundry on the dining table waited to be folded, dirty dishes in the sink. And I remember the dust balls blowing across my hardwood floors, and it would just drive me crazy. But there was nobody that could do it for me. And so that's sort of, and one of the things too was I couldn't wipe my own nose. So when I would cry and the mucus would come out of my nose, I used to keep a kitchen towel on the counter, and I would just bury my head in the kitchen towel and just wipe it like that, because I could not use my arms. And so those were some of the challenges.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm glad you're okay now, except for your broken finger, right?
Well, I have challenges. I have to be very careful. And yeah.
Yeah. How did your illness lead you to write? You said you had to give up, music.
Yes. I had a moment, May of '97, when I was at my lowest point. I had just been through what I call Hell Night. And in my memoir, I talk more about Hell Night, but I thought I was going to lose my mind. The pain was horrible. And in physical therapy, they had created plastic arm braces for me, and they told me that I must sleep with these arm braces strapped to my arms, and I had to sleep on my back. But those arm braces were worthless. They weren't helping me at all. And this Hell Night that I speak of, I took the arm brace off and I threw them against the wall. And I just remember thinking I was going to lose my mind. I said, this is how people lose their mind. The pain gets so unbearable. And somehow I fell asleep. I remember praying. I remember asking God to help me. Fell asleep, woke up the next morning, and my husband had a speaking appointment, and he hated to leave me that morning. He made my coffee. I remember hooking my left hand and sipping the coffee, and he said, honey, I'm not going to go. And I said, no, you must go. And I heard him leave, heard him start the car, and this despair washed over me like I have never felt before or since. And I began to howl like a brings back a lot of memories, this interview.
Oh,
I began to howl like a wild animal. Just howl, howl. And I said to God, I threw myself on the floor and I said to God, I'm 47 years old, at the top of my piano playing choir. If this is how you want me, I'll accept it. But you have to give me a job to do, because I cannot just sit here. And I remember being on my knees, and I remember getting up, and actually I felt better after I accepted this condition. Somehow I felt better. The pain was still there, everything was still there, but I felt better. And a thought came to me, I want you to call everybody you know that's in pain and pray for them. And the first one I called was a lady named Bernice, and she was a double amputee. She had both legs amputated that week due to diabetes. And she was my first one that I called, and I said, Bernice, I called to pray over you. And so I prayed over her, and then somehow everything changed. I shuffled into the living room. I remember slumping on the sofa. I flopped down on my belly, and my left arm, the better arm, dropped down toward my Bible on the floor. And I couldn't pinch the pages, but I just swept it with one haphazard swoop. And the Bible opened to Psalm 77, verse 14. And I'll never forget it. It was the first thing I saw. And it said, you are the God who performs miracles. And I remember I squinted at that. I read it again. I said, I just felt hopeful. And if you looked at my condition, there was no reason for me to hope about anything. And so I remember I reached for a scrap of paper, and I took a pencil, and I just scratched on this little scrap of paper, May 20th, 1997, my miracle. And it looked like hieroglyphics because you could hardly read it, but it was such a ridiculous thing to write that I added in faith, because it was ridiculous for me to write it. And so spring came, and because I was capable of doing nothing, I slept in my jogging clothes. I could get out of bed and go for a walk, and the neighbor would see that I don't have my pajamas on. So, and Psalm 77 became the foundation. And each day I made a conscious effort to focus on good things. And so during these walks, I began to pray. I began to get thoughts, and I would get these thoughts, and I would race home. And my mother had given me an old tape recorder, and I remember pushing the button and recording these thoughts. And so those thoughts became a collection of cassette tapes, and they were captured in small increments, and that became this first manuscript.
wow. Wow. What a journey. Had you written anything before this point? Poetry or prose?
I found it's an interesting question. I did write poetry, but not a lot. I wrote rhymes. And if you don't mind if I could just read something I wrote back in 1980. And
Sure.
my poetry today is nothing that I wrote these little rhymes. But in 1980, because my husband's a Vietnam veteran, 80% disabled, I wrote a tribute to him. It was 1980, so it was 13 years post his coming back from Vietnam, almost dying there. So I call this a tribute, and I say, most people notice outward things. The inside doesn't count. Success is something they must see, their gauge, your bank account. Well, I'm going to tell the story of a man who went to war. He sacrificed his youth on the Vietnamese shore. The nightmares, and there were many, would bring to life again all the fright and horror and even all the pain. 45,000 men died in Vietnam alone, and 49,000 lingered and died right here at home. God took the broken pieces and filled the empty shell. He gave the man a chance again and praised God that he is well. His purple heart's now dusty, the other metals too, will always be reminders of what a war can do. My husband isn't famous. I think that he's the best. My eyes will always see him as God's marvelous success. Those are the types of things that I wrote So I wrote rhymes.
It's still poetry, but yeah, just a different time. Mm-hmm.
A different time and a different feeling. And
so those were, this is going off our script a little bit, but those were just for yourself, or did you actually collect those?
I have a collection. I have a collection of them, never intended to publish them. And at that time, I would write rhymes that came from the wellspring of love. So I wrote rhymes about my children. I wrote rhymes about people I loved. So they were rhymes.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for sharing that. So the poem that you read at the beginning of this interview, that's from your book, Conversations of the Soul. Tell us how that title came to be.
That title poured directly from this painful experience, this lonely experience, isolated, unable. So Conversations of the Soul is named that way because I literally would have conversations with my feelings, my emotions, what was happening to me. If I felt sadness, I spoke to the sadness. If I felt anguish, I spoke to the anguish. If I felt jealousy, I spoke to the jealousy. And so these were conversations that were with my soul. They were not with anybody else because I lived in solitude. I couldn't drive. I lost my friends. I had my husband, my children, but that's how that title was born, because in fact, that is the truth.
Thank you. How long, you've talked a little bit about, when you got started with that first poem, how did the collection develop then? How long did you work on it? Did you know what that first poem that you were going to continue and write a series?
I never intended to publish it. This is a 20-year journey. And I had surgery in 1999. They gave me 13% chance of ever using my arms again. And so this is a 20-year journey of surgery, physical therapy, rehabilitation, all kinds of things like that. And so these cassettes would just collect dust in my drawer. It was something that I had to do. I had to get my pain out. It helped me to speak to the pain. And then 20 years later, here I am. I never thought I'd drive a car again, ever. And my husband said, honey, you know what? I think you ought to pull those cassettes out. And so that's when I published my book in 2020 last year.
This is also going off our planned question, but did that surprise you when you took them out and revisited them, what you had
Yes,
done? Mhm.
yes. And the emotions came back because the experience is forever with you. When they gave me 13% chance of ever using my arms again, they told me that they're going to cut my neck. They're going to move my phrenic nerve. It's going to affect my diaphragm. When we go in there, it's like spaghetti. You might come out completely worse paralyzed. You might lose what you have. And I couldn't imagine life being worse. And I waited another 2 years before I allowed them to do the surgery. And when it was time to do the surgery, I asked Dr. Whiteneck if I could pray. And God bless him, he said, sure. And so all the different nurses came in and we all said a prayer. And one was Catholic, one was Muslim, you know, and it was, nothing mattered. And I remember the first time that I was able to hold a paper cup with a little tiny water in it. It was pretty amazing for me. It was pretty remarkable. And so it's just been an amazing journey.
Yes.
And they told me, Dr. Whiteneck told me that I will have to exercise every 2 hours. And he said, it's going to take you an hour to do your exercises, and then 2 hours later, you have to do them again. He said, if you don't do your therapy, your arms will be frozen and you will not be able to use them. And I remember, whether I was in Walmart, whether I was in a conference, whether I was in a workshop, I would look at my clock and at 2 hours and I would start to do my exercises faithfully. I was faithful. I found a floor where I could lay down because some of the exercises were floor driven. And I went to a conference out in Kansas City with my husband. I'll never forget it. And I was in the back of the auditorium listening to the presentation. And I had my weights and I'm doing my weights and I'm doing my weights. And a man came up to me, I'll never forget it. And he came up to me like this. And he leaned into my face and he said, don't you stop. He said, I stopped. And his arms were frozen at his chin.
Wow.
And I'll never forget it. And so I was faithful at the exercises. I mean, I still have trouble. I have trouble right now because nights are a little bit worse than days, but positive things help with pain.
Mm-hmm.
I have a therapy dog. Church helps. So positive things help.
You have continued to write poetry. So
Yes.
you have several other collections in the works. Can you talk about those?
Do. I wrote a list here because there was quite a few. I have one called Polanka. I'm a member of the Hunterdon and Art Museum, and I go to their poetry workshops and critiques. And I had written a collection of poems about my childhood because my parents are Nazi labor camp survivors. And so I have many, many stories to tell of that. And so this particular collection talks about my Polish life in the Bronx. And she said, you should name this collection Polanka. And so that's the collection. It's My Polish Life in the Bronx, and it's called Polanka. So that's one collection. And I definitely will be publishing that. I have another one called From the Parsonage because I'm a pastor's wife. My husband has been a pastor for 41 or 2 years. And so I have a collection called From the Parsonage. I have a collection on aging, which is funny because as we age together, we're married 52 years, and neither one of us can hear half the time. So life gets pretty hysterical. So I have aging and a couple of other ones that I hope to publish. And I hope to publish also my memoir. I have it half finished, and I want to talk about pain, and I guess I could say the gift of it.
Wow. You've got a lot going on, and behind you, we see some of your artwork. Can you talk about how you got started with your art and what
Yes,
medium you work in?
that was completely unexpected. We had a sadness in the family, and our granddaughter, which we looked forward to having, 9 months, we waited and excited and bought clothes for and had a crib for and all of that. We learned that it was decided that we didn't know that they gave her up for adoption. And it almost killed my husband and I emotionally. When we got the news, it was more than we could bear emotionally. I thought my physical pain was bad, but this emotional pain was definitely like a death. It was definitely like an unexpected death for us. And so I remember sitting on the side of my bed and just, crying. And I said, God, if you could please give me a vessel into which I can pour this pain, I'd be so grateful. And Dianna, I am not an artist. I am a musician. I've been a musician since I'm a little girl. I think like a musician. I majored in voice and piano in college. Artistry, paintbrushes does not even come to mind. Wouldn't touch it. I'm as far away from a paintbrush as here to Japan. And something prodded me to go the next day and buy a canvas and paint. And I'll post the self-portrait on my website because I took a selfie of myself in the art store and I'm sobbing. And I said, I think I need to paint this. And I took a selfie to have a reference photo because I said to God in that aisle, I don't want to be here. I was angry. I want to be with my grandchild. I could care less about the paints. I don't want this. But I took the canvas home. I'm not a trained artist. I went on YouTube and I asked, how do I paint an ocean? And I painted all night. And on my website, the first one is the ocean. I call it Sorrow Swept Away. I think it's the first one behind me. If you see it, it's the middle top one.
Yes, I can see it. Mm-hmm.
It's called Sorrow Swept Away. And then 6 o'clock in the morning, I felt peaceful and I painted roses. And this is at age 72. I'm, like I said, I don't even feel like an artist because when I approach the canvas, I come like I'm coming to a doctor. My sister is an artist and she, oh, I think I'll paint something. Isn't this fun? It has never been, quote, fun for me. It helps me. It comforts me. It's like going to the doctor and you know you're going to get better because he's helping you. And I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but I was not an artist till that night when I said, God, can you give me something into which I can pour my pain? So this is my second big pain experience. I don't even know what to say about it. I really honestly don't. But I've done several art therapy sessions. It's incredible what has happened, how art helps people who don't even know, who can't even express their pain, but somehow it comes out on their canvas and they're able to talk about it and they're able to see the pain in living color. It's pretty remarkable. My latest one, I don't have it here with me, but it is on my website. It's called Autumn Grief. And it's a painting that's all black and white. The autumn leaves are falling, black and white. And two trees in the foreground are bleeding red. It's a forest scene. And just like it says in Psalm 23, he leadeth me beside still waters, there is still water. And these two trees are standing beside the still water. And that painting has touched so many hearts because people are grieving. They might look happy on the outside, but let me tell you, their hearts are broken. And so that particular one is called Autumn Grief. And so I do that kind of therapy. I don't have a shingle. I never signed up to do therapy, just happened. It's just amazing how your life takes you places you had no idea you were going to be.
Yes. Why my next question was where do you draw your inspiration from? But I think you've answered that question. But you continue to paint. You said you've
I continue to
yes.
paint on my web. I'm going to just pull if you look at the top row, and if you look in the distance it'll be on my right, it's a picture of a horse. And my husband and I were watching television, and we were watching, I think it could have been Geronimo, and the soldier was beating the horse something terrible, going up a hill. And I said, honey, stop the video. I have to paint that. I didn't even know how I was going to paint it. At that point, I was just such a brand new baby artist. Who takes on a project like that? But everything in my heart and my soul said, you have to paint that. It had to come out. It had to come out. And I remember I snapped a photograph of the scene. I struck little lines, so I had boxes. And I remember putting these boxes on canvas. And I said, this is no way, there's nothing going to come out of this house that's ever going to be that horse. When I began to paint the little boxes and doing my reference photo, okay, the ear goes here. Okay, I'll put it, okay, the nostril goes here. Oh, okay. And from the canvas rose this horse. And so I call that painting When Pain Rides Us Hard. And it was important for me to show the pain of that horse. And as I related to us, when, pain just drives us and rides us, and it just came from the depth of my soul. That's my inspiration. I have many happy things I've painted. I painted a portrait of my children. So I've done some still lifes, and I'm very, very peaceful when I'm painting a forest scene, because I realize that when I paint, and I can't paint on an easel, I have to paint flat. and I have to support my elbow, and I can't do it for very long. So I have to be very careful. I feel like I'm there. When I'm painting a wooded scene, I feel literally like I'm walking through the woods. So I have some very peaceful experiences also. So this whole art thing has been a learning. I've learned so much. I've learned so much through the process of art. I'm going to just turn my, and I hope you don't mind, I get a little excited about.
No, that's fine.
There is a painting up in the upper right-hand corner. Probably can't see it real well. I'll put it on my website, but it is my youth group. And there is 5 children under the spray of a fire truck. And I was so touched by them. They love me so much. And I always tell them, why do you want to hang around with an old lady for? But the youth at church love me and I love them. So I'm always doing stuff for them, with them, whatever. We have people that help, but so I decided to paint them. And what an experience that was, because here I am painting them so reverently because I wanted to be true to their skin color. I wanted to be true to them. And then comes time, because they all had their bathing suits on, and I'm painting their heinies and I'm painting their little sneakers. And it was such, I did not know what a, and I'm going to use the word holy because I don't know what else to use, reverent. When you are painting another person, it is truly a reverential experience. I don't even know if that's a word, but I thought about how God created us and how he must have felt when he was knitting us together, because it's very, very special. And I didn't know that till I became an artist. I did not know how special it is. I just painted a portrait of my husband as a young man in Vietnam. That was another one of those moments. I just wanted to be true to his face and his cheeks and every muscle, and just there was another one of those moments when you're painting somebody else, you have a relationship with what's happening, and it's quite transcendental. It really is. You forget that you're here. I wish I could explain it better, but
I think I understand.
yeah, art has really been a teacher for me. I've not, I mean, when I do art therapy, I sort of am a teacher, but art has been my teacher. There's not one painting that I walk away from that I don't say, wow, that was an amazing learning experience.
That's fantastic. You referenced earlier that you're born a musician. You graduated with a music degree. You play piano. Had to give it up. Have you been able to do
I didn't
any?
graduate. I went 2 years. I didn't want to.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 years.
Have you been able to do any music? Are you able to make it part of your life?
I have to really, really be careful, because when I overdo it, whether cleaning the house or I can't write at all. One of the blessings I had, my husband took me to one of these abilities conferences, and there were all kinds of vendors there with help aids. And when he took me to one of these conferences, I was able to get a foot pedal mouse. That's when I learned about the Dragon speech recognition program. So all my work is done via dictation and this foot pedal mouse. And So I still have to be very careful. Do I play the piano? Maybe twice, 3 times a year. I
Mhm.
give myself like a little ice cream cone and I play a song very slowly. I close my eyes and I relish every single moment. I have to prop my arm up on a pillow and I dare not overdo it because the numbness will come back real quick. So, can I write a thank you note? I can write a short sentence and then I'd better stop. I can't write Christmas cards. There's, that's all gone. Any heavy use of my arm, and I have to even be careful of my left arm because that'll peter out pretty quickly if I'm not careful. So I've learned to do shortcuts. We got rid of all the wall-to-wall carpeting in the house, so it's all hardwood floors now. So we have changed our way. I'm less a perfectionist today than I was years ago, so I'm able to get through a day. I've learned my boundaries. I've learned the speed at which I can move. So I've learned to get help. And I've learned that, a meal doesn't have to have a lot of variety. You can get through a simple supper with a vegetable and a protein, and we're good to go. So
Wow, an incredible journey.
yeah, it really
You've been
has
on.
been. I've learned a lot.
Wow. Before we wrap up, would you read another of your poems for the audience?
Sure.
Thanks.
I'm going to read the very last poem in my book. It's called Preserves. And it really, I'm so glad I picked it for my last poem. Conversations of the Soul, I kept the poems in chronological order. And the reader will be able to see how in the beginning you're going to see a lot of agony. And toward the end, there's a lot of peace. And the neat thing about this particular poem, it won the Greater Philadelphia Christian Writers non-published category award in 2008. And it's called Preserves. And this really describes this book and the other collections I have coming, the art. It really encapsulates all of that. So it's called Preserves. Like twisting open a ball canning jar in January, I open my prayer journal in my soul's winter to savor summer. Strawberries jammed, grapes jellied, tomatoes canned, cucumbers pickled. Words written down, preserved while fresh, in ink on paper. Your answers to my prayers. Like canning, preserving your miracles makes me sweat. My mental pot boils over in the summer heat. And in between the canning, I weed and harvest. I bring in your blessings by the bushel basket, fuel for my faith to eat when life's temperature drops, when gardens die, when empty stalks freeze over, when the winds of doubt howl across my fields, buried in white glaze. Where trees and faith stand naked, shaking in the cold. These preserves, sweet morsels written, preserve me, your answers to my prayers. I read my journal and I taste summer, your strawberries, your grapes, your tomatoes, your cucumbers, there. Then, as one closes the last empty jar, the following spring, I close my journal, and in the trees and in my faith, buds sprout. I see a new summer with fresh answers to new prayers.
Wow, thank you very much for that and for this interview. Elizabeth, where can people buy your book?
If they go to www.elizabethhelenrose.com, I have information there. They can go to Amazon, they can go to Barnes and Noble, and if they do a search, Elizabeth Helen Rose, Conversations of the Soul, it'll come up. And certainly my phone number is there as well. I do speaking engagements. I do workshops on the gift of pain. And I would love if somebody contacted me. Maybe they have a ladies' breakfast, they need a speaker or whatever. So all that information is on my website. And I will be at the Greater Lehigh Valley Writers Group Author Expo at the Book and Puppet Company Center Square on October 23rd, and I will have a book table there. I'll be there with the other authors from that group, Greater Lehigh Valley Writers Group, and I think it's noon to 4 p.m. So we'll be at Center Square Easton, all of us, and I'll be there, and I look forward to meeting everybody.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. And thank everyone else for attending today's interview. You're invited to attend the many other events that are scheduled during the Easton Book Festival. Enjoy.